intentionality. It's a bit of a philosophical term, but it basically means that it refers to the directedness of consciousness. He argues that even though fictional language doesn't have this direct referent in the real world, it still has intentionality. The author intends to create certain images, emotions, ideas, in the mind of the reader. And the reader, in turn, intends to understand and experience those things.
So it's like this unspoken agreement between the author and the reader. The author sets up the rules of the world, this fictional world, and the reader kind of agrees to play along and enter that world with an open mind.
Exactly. And Cofré suggests that this shared intentionality, this meeting of the minds, is what makes fictional communication possible. He also points out that even though the objects and events in a fictional world don't literally exist, they can still have a profound impact on us, emotionally and intellectually.
It makes you realize that fiction, even though it deals with these imagined worlds, can have very real consequences. Think about how reading a book can change your perspective on a certain issue or inspire you to, take action in your own life.
That's a perfect example. It shows how art, in all its forms, can not only reflect reality, but also shape it.
This is just incredible. I feel like we've covered so much ground already. From Mises to fictional worlds to this whole idea of intentionality. But I have to admit, I'm still wrestling with this concept that fictional worlds are somehow as real as, say, the world of mathematics or our everyday experience.
Oh, that's totally understandable. It's definitely one of the more challenging aspects of Cofré's argument. I don't think he's saying that fictional worlds literally exist in the same way as, physical objects or mathematical concepts. Instead, he's saying they have a kind of ontological status. It's a fancy term. But basically, it means that they have a particular way of being that's distinct from, but no less real than, other aspects of our experience.
Okay, so maybe it's not about saying that Don Quixote actually rode a horse through La Mancha, but more about recognizing that the character and his world have a certain reality within that realm of fiction.
Exactly. And that reality can be just as powerful, just as meaningful as the reality of our everyday lives. Think about how a fictional character can stay with you long after you've finished a book, or how a scene in a film can evoke vivid emotions and memories even years later.
It's like the fictional world becomes a part of your own personal reality, in a way. It leaves its mark on you.
Precisely, and that speaks to the transformative power of art. It can expand our understanding of ourselves, the world, challenge our assumptions, and ultimately make us, more fully human.
Wow, this deep dive has already been a real mind bender, in the best way possible, of course. It feels like we're just scratching the surface, though. There's still so much to explore.
You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
and that's what makes this conversation so exciting. There's always more to discover when it comes to art and how it, interacts with our reality. And speaking of that interaction between art and reality, Cofré brings up this, fascinating idea, the notion that fictional worlds can actually modify our existence. They can impact how we think, how we feel, and even how we act in the real world.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Think about how reading a book can change your perspective on, a social issue or something, or how a powerful film can, inspire you to make a difference in the world.
Right, exactly. And Cofré goes even deeper, suggesting that that influence actually works both ways. Our understanding of reality shapes how we see art. And die art can, in turn, make us see reality differently. He even suggests that this back and forth has these profound implications for how we actually live our lives.
Okay, now my brain is officially doing backflips. Can you give me, a concrete example? What do you mean?
Sure. Imagine someone who's, lived a pretty sheltered life, maybe in a small town, surrounded by people with, similar backgrounds and experiences, and then they read Les Miserables, or they watch a documentary about poverty in a different part of the world. Those experiences might, open their eyes to social injustices that they were never really aware of before, make them more empathetic towards people who are struggling, and maybe even motivate them to, get involved in activism or social work or something.
So it's like art can be a kind of wake-up call, right? It can expand our horizons and challenge those assumptions, those comfortable assumptions we have about the world.
Exactly. And Cofré also discusses how this dynamic between art and reality has kind of played out throughout art history, particularly in the debate about realism.
Ah, realism.
Yeah.
That takes us back to our earlier conversation about mimesis,
Right.
that idea of art as imitation.
You got it. Cofré points out that for centuries, a lot of artists and critics believed that art should, strive to accurately represent the external world, to capture it as faceable. But he argues that that this view is ultimately limited because it ignores the active role of the artist. in, selecting, interpreting, expressing their own unique vision of reality.
It's like that famous saying, art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. And Cofré gives some really interesting examples of how artists have, challenged the conventions of realism throughout history. He talks about the Impressionists who, broke away from that traditional focus on depicting objects with like photographic accuracy. Instead, they focused on capturing those fleeting effects of light and color, the way a scene feels, rather than how it looks, in a purely objective sense.
Oh, I love the Impressionists. Their paintings are so vibrant, so alive. It's like you can almost feel the sunlight on your skin, or the breeze rustling through the trees. They capture a feeling, an atmosphere.
Exactly. And Cofré points out that this shifts towards a more subjective and expressive form of art. It was a radical departure from the prevailing norms of the time. He even suggests that this new approach to art was kind of a reflection of a changing understanding of reality itself. With the rise of modern science and philosophy, this idea of a fixed, objective reality, it started, crumble. And artists, they began to explore these new ways of representing the world. That reflected that.
So it's not just that art styles change over time, it's that those changes often reflect like deeper shifts in how we understand ourselves and the world around us. It's like art is this mirror, not just to the physical world, but to our evolving ideas, our perceptions.
That's a brilliant insight. And Cofré takes this even further, arguing that the most radical forms of realism are actually those that embrace abstraction. He cites artists like Kandinsky and Beckmann, who believe that true realism lay in, capturing the essence of things, that underlying, spiritual or emotional reality that lies beyond those like surface appearances.
Okay, now you're really blowing my mind. How can abstract art, which doesn't even try to depict like recognizable objects, how can that be considered realistic?
It is a fascinating paradox, right? But Cofré argues that abstract art can actually be more realistic than traditional representational art, because it allows the artist to express like a deeper truth about the world, one that's not bound by those limitations of visual perception. Think of it this way. A portrait might capture someone's physical likeness, but an abstract painting could capture like their inner world, their emotions, their energy.
So it's like abstract art is trying to capture the invisible, the intangible, the things that can't be, seen with the naked eye, but are still very real and present in our lives.
You got it. And Cofré suggests that appreciating this kind of art, it requires like a different kind of seeing, a more intuitive and imaginative way of engaging with the world. He even uses this term inner vision to describe this ability to see beyond the surface of things and grasp that underlying essence.
It's like we have to shift our perspective.
Right.
Look beyond what's, immediately apparent and try to connect with those like deeper layers of meaning that the artist is trying to express.
Exactly. It's about opening ourselves up to new ways of seeing and experiencing the world, which is, what art at its best can do.
This whole conversation has really opened my eyes to the different ways of understanding realism. I used to think of it as just, depicting things accurately, but now I realize it's so much more complex and nuanced than that.
And that's the beauty of exploring these ideas. It challenges our assumptions, expands our understanding, not just of art, but of reality itself. It makes us more aware of the different lenses through which we, experience the world.
When we were talking earlier about how fictional worlds can change our perceptions, even inspire us to act in the real world, it made me think about the role of art in social change.
That's such an important point. Throughout history, artists have used their work to, challenge injustice, to give voice to the marginalized, to inspire movements for social change.
Think about those murals that depict struggles for civil rights, or the protest songs that have become like anthems for entire generations. They're not just expressing emotions, they're actually like mobilizing people, raising awareness, challenging the status quo.
You're absolutely right. And it speaks to the power of art to connect with us on this like visceral level, to move us, to awaken our consciences, and to, inspire us to create a better world.
It's like art can be a catalyst for social change, a way of bringing people together and channeling towards this, common goal.
Precisely. And it reminds us that art is never truly separate from the social and political context in which it's created. It both reflects and shapes the world around it.
It makes you realize that art isn't just something we passively consume for entertainment or decoration. It's this powerful force that can challenge us, inspire us, even change the course of history.
Absolutely. And that's something worth thinking about as we continue to explore this, complex,
And
ever-evolving relationship between art and reality.
While we're talking about this power of art to shape, how we understand the world, it makes me think back to those fictional worlds, the ones we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, those possible worlds that artists create.
Right. Do you think those worlds, those fictional worlds, can have the same kind of impact on us as like real world experiences? Can they really change, how we see things and inspire us to act?
That's a really great question. And it's something that Cofré actually addresses directly. He argues that fictional worlds, even though they don't literally exist, they can have a very real impact on our thoughts, our feelings, even our actions.
I can see that. I mean, I've definitely had moments where a book or a movie has just stayed with me long after I've finished it, and it makes me, think about things in a new way, or even prompts me to, change something in my own life.
Exactly. And Cofré uses this really interesting example. He talks about someone who's always lived a sheltered life, maybe never really confronted with the realities of poverty or social injustice. And then they read Les Miserables, or they watch a documentary about a different part of the world. And it's like a light bulb goes off for them. They start to see the world differently. They develop this new sense of empathy. And maybe they're even inspired to get involved in activism or social work.
So it's like those fictional worlds, even though they're made up, they can, crack open our understanding of reality. Make us more aware of things we might have been totally oblivious to before.
Exactly. And Cofré highlights how this interplay between art and reality works in both directions. Our understanding of reality shapes how we interpret art. And art can challenge and expand that understanding. It creates a kind of feedback loop.
It's not just a one-way street, it's dynamic. Art and reality are constantly informing and influencing each other.
Right. And Cofré suggests that this has some really profound implications for how we live our lives. He argues that by engaging with art, whether it's reading a novel, watching a film, listening to music, whatever, we're opening ourselves up to these new ways of seeing the world, new perspectives, new possibilities.
I'm starting to see how all these ideas that we've been discussing, they all kind of fit together. Mimesis, fictional worlds, the role of the reader, it's like a giant puzzle where each piece contributes to this deeper understanding of what art is and how it, impacts us.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about reducing art to this simple formula or a single definition. It's about embracing that complexity and recognizing its potential to transform our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
I gotta say, this deep dive has been an incredible journey. We've explored some really challenging concepts, but I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the power of art.
Me too. And I think the most important takeaway is that this is really just the beginning. There's a whole universe of art and ideas out there waiting to be explored. And each new encounter has the potential to, change us in these really profound ways.
So what you're saying is we should all go out and read more books, watch more movies, visit more museums.
Absolutely. But more than that, I think it's about, engaging with art in a mindful way, being open to its different forms, different interpretations, allowing it to challenge our assumptions and expand our horizons.
When we started this deep dive, I was mostly thinking about, literature. But as we've been talking, I've realized that all these ideas, they apply to art in all its forms. Painting, sculpture, music, dance, film. It's like a whole new world has opened up to me.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of, exploring these theoretical concepts. They give us this framework for understanding and appreciating the vast and diverse world of art.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this fascinating journey. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep engaging with the world of art. There's always something new to discover.
Great advice. Until next time, keep diving.